Hey everyone, Ryan here at Etrailer. Today on our 2024 Ford F-250 Super Duty, we're going to be showing you how to install the Firestone Air Command wireless air compressor system. But before we do that, let's take a minute, we'll check this kit out and make sure it's going to be right for you. So for those of you that have suspension enhancement on your truck, air springs or airbags are a really popular way to go. They work, you can adjust them, so on and so forth. Well, if you have something like that set up, having an onboard air compressor really goes a long way. It just makes adjusting the pressures on the fly really easy, and also helps out with maintaining the bags as well. There's a lot of different air compressor systems out on the market, and I kind of break them down into two different groups, right? You have your more classic analog type ones where you actually get, your gauges and some switches that you would mount up in the truck. And then you have your wireless type ones like our Firestone one here today. And, what one's going to be best for you, that really just depends on your truck. So a lot of these late model trucks for the last, 10 years, you're starting to get so much stuff going on, right? You got big screens in here, tons of different options and everything. And honestly, with a setup like this, you just don't have a ton of room to use an analog type compressor system because those gauges are pretty big. They're bulky. You got to run air lines into the cab and everything. And, with all the electrical components now, you just don't have the room. And that's where the wireless ones come into play. You don't have to deal with any of that stuff. And now, with technology, in the past, right when these wireless ones started to come out, every now and again you'd run into some connectivity issues and things like that. And that's not to say all these wireless ones are going to be perfect, right? Because stuff like that does happen, but they've really came a long way. And they do a really good job of actually being able to connect to the compressor and make those adjustments on the fly without really ever running into too many issues. Here's a look at the interface on the app there, and pretty straightforward. You just got your gauge and your adjustments, so by pushing this button, it'll let you ramp up the pressure. Compressor kicks on. It's pretty fast. To connect and everything and fill the bags up. It starts to get a little bit slower once you get, higher pressures in them, but that's just kind of the nature of these kits. They're not gigantic air compressors by any means. But this particular one, you're going to be able to inflate your bags up to 120 PSI. Keep in mind, though, you don't want to exceed what the airbags are rated for. A lot of them out there are going to be only rated for 100 PSI, but some of the more heavy-duty ones are rated for 150, so it just kind of depends. So keep that in mind. And, it also makes maintaining your bags pretty easy, too. So you have these, pretty much all the air springs out on the market are going to have a minimum pressure of 5. Just to prevent damage to the bag and everything. Well, sometimes that can kind of be a pain because, if it's winter time or something, you get these temperature swings. You might have 10 pounds of air in the bag one day. Gets cold overnight. It might drop down below 5 pounds of air in the bags. And then you'll have to get the hose out and fill them up. You'll probably get sick of that pretty quick or forget or run out of time and end up damaging the bag in the long run. Well, with this, you're always going to have your mobile device with you, right? And these settings here, you have two memory settings, if you will. You could hop on this thing, hit your memory 1. We have it set at 10. It'll do the work for you, and that's really all there is to it. Underneath the truck, this is how the kit can look installed on your vehicle. And it's a fairly clean setup. The compressor is pretty compact in size. And you can mount it up a lot of different ways if need be. And you'll have a second component or main component, which is the ECU, which again, pretty compact in size, mounted up a lot of different ways. The wiring harness that they give you is pretty nice. It's all pretty much plug and play. There's loom on it already. So they try to make wiring it as easy as possible, which is a good thing. A lot of people, tend to struggle with electrical and stuff like that. And this is going to be a single path compressor kit. All right, meaning that you'll have one air line that goes to the back of your truck and ties into both airbags. So if you put 50 pounds air in, both of them are going to get 50 pounds air. You can't adjust them individually. With that said, there's plenty of dual path kits out on the market that you can look into that will allow you to adjust them individually. So if that's something that's important to you, you definitely find something out there. A lot of people do wonder if, a Firestone compressor kit has to be paired up with Firestone airbags. And the answer is no. Perfect example today on our truck, we have Airlift Load Lifter 5000 bags installed, and compressor kit works just fine. Ultimately, the compressor doesn't know any better, right? It's got one job, to inflate a bag or deflate it. So if you got Airlift bags, you're in good shape. If you have Firestone bags, you're good. Or even if you have a different manufacturer that might be out there, chances are really, really good. It'll work with those as well. The kit's going to come with several fittings, a manual inflation valve, and this bracket here, which I really like. You can zip tie it to your hitch. That way, if you want to set it up like this, they give you stuff to do so, you can still tie everything in. And let's say if you happen to lose your phone or leave it at the house or whatever the case may be, you can still manually adjust the bags in a pinch. This kit is going to be compatible with Android or Apple devices, so regardless of what you got there, you should be able to connect to it and work everything out. And to compare this kit to some of the other ones, I'm a big fan of the Airlift, the Wireless One Easy Mount compressor systems. Those come with a bracket that you don't really have to do a lot of drilling or anything. It's a really nice kit as well. This Firestone one seems durable and like it'll hold up, but just talking from my prior experience, that's kind of what I'm a fan of, the Airlift ones. And a lot of those too, you can get those kits with a remote as well. So you can have a wireless remote and be able to use your app. But you can't really go wrong either way when it comes down to it. Having a compressor kit on your truck in conjunction with your airbags is a no-brainer. You see a lot of people, or we get a lot of people in here that get the airbags, and then a little bit down the road they come back and they're wanting a compressor kit because it just makes life a lot easier on you. As far as the installation goes, it really wasn't too bad. I'll say probably the worst part is just working up here. It's pretty tight, and our truck has these powered running boards, so they're kind of in my way a little bit. But just drilling everything and getting it mounted was probably the worst part. Routing the lines up into the engine compartment, or the electrical rather, pretty straightforward. Then running your airline back to your bags takes a little bit of time, but at the end of the day, it's something that you do one time, and then you have the kit, at your convenience to use and go from there. But if this is something you plan on doing yourself, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead and get started on it now. To begin our installation, first things first, we can begin to prep our compressor. So this is how it's going to come. Coming out of this fitting here, we're going to have this quick connect fitting, and you can see that sealer locker on the threads there. You want to thread that in, then we're going to tighten it so we get a couple of threads to engage here. So I have a 1/2 inch wrench, run it down a few turns. Definitely don't want to over tighten it, but these being brass, you can crack them pretty easy. So that feels pretty good there. And then if we rotate this, we're going to have that hole there. And we'll have this fitting. With this one, we'll thread that in and take a 12 millimeter and tighten it down. kit's going to come with a short length of this tubing here. It's a little bit softer, and that's going to be for our air intake. And I'm just going to take one end and push it over that barbed fitting there. We can figure out where we need to mount our compressor up, and where I've chosen is a spot over here on the passenger side, right here in this area. So kind of where the bed is going to meet the cab, just kind of up underneath though, by our frame here. So what I've chosen is this gusset here. And what I've done, so I'm gonna mount it like this on this side, right? So I held this up where I want to mount it and marked a couple of holes and drilled them out. Now in our case, so we have clearance for our wires and everything. One side's gonna be hanging off a little bit, and I think that would be fine, but just to be on the safe side, I made a little bracket that I'm gonna attach for a little bit of extra support there. The hardware that you can use to mount this up, that's included, take a machine screw and a flat washer. You know, you'll run it through the compressor, through there, through that piece of metal, you know, through the gusset that we're going to mount it to. And then where it's going to come out, you can put on another flat washer and a nylon lock nut. So that's what I'm going to use to secure this. Being that it's pretty tight up there, I'll go ahead and get that done and show you how it turned out. Here's how the compressor turned out when it's mounted up. Really nothing to it. The bolt, you're going to have a Phillips head on one end, and then the nut side, you can hold that from spinning with the 3/8 socket or wrench. And when you tighten these down, you don't need to get too carried away. There's these little rubber bushings in there, and if you overdo it, a lot of times they'll split and start to break and everything. So I usually tighten them down until they start kind of getting sandwiched a little bit, and call it good. That tube that we connected to the compressor, that's going to be for our air intake. And so I just have it running maybe a foot behind the compressor here where our first bed bolt is, this area. And you want to put a loop in the airline. That acts as a way to catch moisture if it does happen to get in. So I zip tied it, and if you zip tie this stuff, don't do it too tight because you don't want to pinch it. You know, you just want it tight enough to keep it in place. And then you can take our filter. This is a barbed fitting, and push it right over it. And I put a zip tie right here. I'm going to just zip tie this right here in this area, and it's up high. It's kind of protected by this little area here, so it should be for a good spot. We can mount up our ECU now, and what I've done, you need to mount this up somewhat close to the compressor. That way the wiring harness will reach it, and you know, you have an air line that goes to it. So I just went right behind the compressor up here in this area, and what I did was just hold it here, mark 2 holes, and then drilled them out. And I'm just going to use self-tapping screws to secure this. The machine screws that they give you, just really not a great place to go, and trying to get them inside of the frame and everything just be a huge headache. And I also put a little piece of 2-sided sticky tape on the back of this just for good measure. You don't have to do this. It doesn't come with the kit, but I like to do it not only for that, but you got to line this up. You know, it's a little bit easier to get the holes lined up. I'm just sticking it in place there. It'll hold it for you. And I grab my self-tapping screws and tighten this on down. We can start to hook up some of our airlines, and you know, whenever we make an airline connection or cut, these are all going to be the same. You know, you want to use this method that I'm about to show you here. So what I've done is cut maybe, I don't know, about a foot 8 to 12 inches of airline off the big bundle that they give you. And when you cut this stuff, you want to use a tool like this. There's a tubing cutting tool that you can use, or you can use a utility knife, take a block of wood, cut straight down on it. That'll work too. You just don't want to use a regular pair of snips because it'll kink it and kind of cut it weird and it'll potentially leak. So we'll get a good clean straight cut here. That's a good example of how it should look. You know, there's no burrs or anything like that going on. And then on one end of this, you can take this T, one of the T's that they give you. And the way these fittings work, they're just quick connect, push to connect fittings. So that'll just plug right on in. You'll feel it kind of lock in and engage in there. I took that fitting that we just built, right? And I took that piece of tube, and you want to put a loop in it, and that's going to plug right into the fitting there on our air compressor. All right, so that's that piece. Coming out of the T, you can take a piece of airline tube. It's probably 8 or 10 inches. And that is going to plug into the fitting there on our little computer. And then coming out of this end, you can take the rest of your airline tubing, you know, cut the end clean, plug it in, and this is going to get routed back to our air spring. So I just have it running up through there, and in the kit they're going to give you a couple of these little sleeves. So if you route it by anything hot or sharp or anything like that, you can use a sleeve there. And so since I'm going over the frame, I just put it on there for some extra protection. And that's going to hold true when you're routing airlines or wiring or anything for that matter. Make sure to do your best to avoid any hot or moving parts, real sharp bends, things of that nature. Underneath the truck, this is where our airline is going to come inside here and running through here. And since we're somewhat close to the exhaust, I put another sleeve, thermal sleeve on there. And it just continues towards the back and kind of towards the passenger side a little bit, where it comes here. And then got to kind of lose it for a second because it's on top of our fuel tank, but more or less it just runs kind of at an angle towards the rear passenger side. The airline, like I said, comes out from on top of our fuel tank, running along here all the way to the back of the truck, and here close to the end of it is where I have our connections made. Line comes here, and then I took a T fitting, plugged it into the T. All right, on this end of the T, I took a couple inch piece, plugged it in, which goes to another T. And here's where it actually will connect to our existing airlines that are going to our airbag. So on this end, on this side rather, this is our driver's side line coming from our airbag, plug that in. This end, that's from our passenger side airline coming from our airbag. And then what this line is, this is actually going to our manual inflation valve, which the kit does come with one, but if you have airbags or air springs already, you're going to have this set up more than likely. So coming out of this is our existing manual inflation valve line. That runs down and goes to our valve here. Now we used to have it set up to where you could inflate each bag individually. By doing it this way, you know, you're only going to have one inflation valve fitting. So if you do decide to ever need to do that, when you go to air this up, you know, the bags are just going to get the same amount of pressure. You won't be able to adjust them individually. Back to the side of our truck, we can start to work on our electrical. So we can take the harness that they give you and take the connector end. That's just going to plug right into the computer there. And this is going to start to run towards the front of the truck along our frame. maybe a foot or two. And coming off of the harness, you're going to have this connector here, this little spade terminal, and the red wire coming directly out of our air compressor is going to have the female end. Those are just going to plug right into each other, like that. And then you're going to have a black wire coming right out of the air compressor as well. That's just going to be a ground. So it already has a ring terminal and everything on it. And I just use the self-tapping screw to secure that right into the side of our chassis. With that electrical connection made, I did tape it up real good just to help keep it protected. And now we can continue to route our harness towards the front of the truck. So pretty straightforward with this one. I just followed the factory wiring that's running along the side of our frame. Running all the way up through there. Here's where it's going to start to come over just a little bit towards the outside. And then our loom, you can push it up and through this opening here behind your wheel well liner up into the engine compartment. Underneath the hood, this is where our wiring comes up here in the passenger side corner. And the harness is going to split off into 3 wires. You'll have red power wire, this black ground, and then this yellow wire. In this case, the yellow wire is not going to be used, so we'll just start with that and get it out of the way. I'm not going to cut it off the harness or anything, but I'm just going to tape up the end and kind of tuck it off to the side, out of sight. Next, we can work on our ground wire, which is the black one with the ring terminal. That's going to go to the negative post on our battery. So I have a 10mm socket here. I'm going to remove that nut. It's just going to slide right on top of the stud there. And tighten it back down. For the power wire, that's going to have a built-in fuse holder, and I just zip tied it to this factory wire loom here. And what I'm going to do is remove that fuse before I hook it up. So as far as the ring terminal goes, pretty much set up the exact same way as the ground. I'm just pushing it through our little dust cover there on our battery. Very, very similar. We got that 10mm nut. Put that ring terminal over it. Reinstall the nut and tighten it back down. So what you want to do now is download the Firestone app on your mobile device, have that ready more or less, and then take the fuse, put it into the holder, put it into the little protective case there. And once you do that, you know, the app will kind of prompt you what to do. Pretty easy to figure out. It'll scan, it'll find the device, you make a code for it, and then your screen will pop up to where you can test everything and make adjustments. So what what I'm going to do here is just turn the compressor way up, maybe like 50 pounds or something. That way we can run it through its course and check for any leaks or anything like that. With the system pressurized now, you want to check for leaks. A couple of ways you can do it. One of them, if it's a bad leak, usually you can hear it right away. Sometimes though, you get a small leak, and those are a little harder to find. So what I do is all of the fittings and connections that we made, I come back with soapy water and I spray them down real good. And what you're looking for, if you see bubbles, little bubbles continuously and rapidly forming, you know you got a leak there. Give it a minute while you're spraying it to check for it. Our case looks like these are all sealed up. I checked the other ones already. Those are all sealed up, so we're in good shape. But if you do happen to have a leak, let the air out of the system. You can remove the line from the quick connect fitting, cut it clean again, plug it back in, and fill it full of air and check it again until you verify that you're leak free. We have no leaks at 50 pounds. I ramped up the pressure to 70 psi just to be on the safe side, double checked everything, and we're good to go. So with that done, that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Firestone Air Command air compressor system on our 2024 Ford F-250.